Welcome to the tutorial for Burai Fighter Deluxe on Game Boy at the ultimate difficulty setting. And this difficulty setting is actually a lot easier than the NES version of the game on the easiest difficulty setting, Eagle, which I just beat yesterday. So this took about 54 minutes to beat. The NES one took more like 4.5 hours to beat on the easiest difficulty. So this is much, much easier. So I would recommend starting on Ultimate if you have any kind of experience with shooters. It's a pretty slow game overall, I think because of the hardware. The Game Boy Color version seems much more sped up, so I may try that next. This was a pretty easy kill. I started on Ultimate using a password. You can also unlock Ultimate mode by beating Ace first, but I just went straight to Ultimate with the password since it looked easy enough in the videos. But yeah, this one works the same as the NES version as far as the mechanics of the game. When you hold down the fire button, you'll lock into whatever direction you're facing, so you can strafe in that direction. So you don't want to use a rapid fire controller for this game because it'll mess up the strafing. You won't be able to strafe. So you definitely want to be able to lock into those directions. And aside from that, I only use one weapon, pretty much like I did with the NES version for the most part. I did use some lasers in the NES version. I'm part of the final stage, but I pretty much just used the ring weapon, the R weapon, basically the R pickup. So, wait for the letter to change to R and get that if you want to use the same weapon. I like it because it can shoot through walls, and when you power it up, it has a spread shot. So you can take out a lot of shit early with it, even though it's not as powerful as some of the other weapons. I think it's the least powerful, but it goes through walls. It makes up for it. You also have bombs if you press A, which are good if you're about to get hit by something. You can get rid of the projectiles on the screen. So it's something to consider using. You earn the bombs by collecting the little gems that the enemies sometimes drop, so make sure to collect those. I do avoid collecting some of them when they're on the edges of the screen in the later levels because enemies can pop out of the edges and kill you. So, you don't always want to try to grab them. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the basics of the gameplay. And the bullets and everything move much slower in this version compared to the NES version and even the Game Boy Color version from what I saw, called Burai Fighter Color, which I may do a playthrough of soon. From what I noticed, there's only 5 levels here, but it's still about the same length as the NES version, and the reason for that is because they actually made some of the levels larger. And I think the layouts are different. Somewhat different than they are in the NES version, but some of the levels are quite a bit larger, like especially the first 2 levels are pretty long. So I think that's where the extra, length came from. They cut out the 2 overhead view levels in the NES version, which is actually an improvement because those levels weren't, they were pretty weak. So it's trimmed down a little bit, but the NES version is still a lot better because it plays a lot, it's a lot smoother, it's a lot faster and more challenging. But this was a fun game to kill off. It was it was pretty much a quickie. It took like 54 minutes, so I may have used a few continues, but it didn't get too challenging until like the 4th level. The 4th level was really the only level that was kind of challenging. I had a few issues because the hitboxes are not like you would expect in this game. The hit detection is a little off. You can't get as close to bullets and enemies as you would expect normally in a shooter. It seems like there's square-shaped hitboxes around the bullets or something where if you're close to the bullet, you will just die. I was getting close to the body of some bosses and I kept dying. Normally I would be able to do that, with no problem in the NES version or in other versions, other types of shooters like this. So, you might have to keep a little bit more distance than you would normally. But as long as you keep that in mind, it's overall it's not a hard game. It depends on your level of experience with shooters, though. It's all relative. This is very easy. Just shoot these balls that appear. You know, not much to that. Just try to kill them immediately before they, you know, split up. But, you know, you'll get them with your other shots anyway, as long as you're not right on it. It's kind of hard to die on those. Once I max out my ring weapon at where it says RA at the bottom right, I just get the R things because they give you points and you can earn 1-ups from points. So sometimes you get some extra lives, so it could be useful. For this, just shoot these balls off this, you know, these little pulsating bulbs. Extremely easy. You can shoot through the boss with the ring weapon. So you can't shoot through the tentacles, but you can shoot through the boss's body. So just, you know, use that to your advantage. The boss moves extremely slow. Very easy. You'll get a password. You get a password on each level, and you have infinite continues. If you lose all your lives, then you'll start back at the beginning of the stage. But there are several checkpoints in each stage, so if you just lose, you know, if you lose a life, you'll go back to the checkpoint. You lose all your lives, then you go back to the continue screen. But you know, the levels are not super long or anything, and they're really not that dense or that difficult for these kind of games. This, you know, this is really tame for this kind of game. I think it's more about the limitations of the Game Boy hardware. That, you know, I think there's a lot of slowdown, which makes this probably what makes this game, you know, easy. But the Game Boy Color version seems to have fixed that issue. I don't know if it's a different game, but it looked a lot faster. It looked more similar to the NES version, speed-wise. Occasionally they will do things with the scrolling of the screen to try to block you in and get you killed. So just pay attention to the way the screen's moving. There's one trial and error point on the final stage, which is very easy. Once you know it, you won't go back in there again. But there's a dead end that you get locked into and you die. But it's at the beginning of the stage. And then, you know, after that, there's no reason that you would go back in there again. So it's easy. Aside from that, I don't think there was really any dead ends that I got locked into. I was able to... A lot of times there was openings on both ends. It didn't seem to try to trap you too much with that, but you know, you do have to watch how the screen moves. I think there's only one part where the screen moves kind of fast and you have to kind of maneuver around through the gaps, but it's very easy. And there's going to be another easy boss at the end of all this. But yeah, there's even less to say on this game because this game is, you know, so much easier than the NES one, even on the hardest mode. But yeah, if you enjoy this, check out the NES one too. I have a full tutorial on that too, where I try to break down and explain everything I did to beat the game. I also showed a failed attempt as well, and I showed some of the type of practice I do with save states to learn a game. So you know, there's a little variety there. I try to show different behind the scenes type of things, what goes into putting the games together. Yeah, the last boss is extremely easy in this one. He's a huge pain in the ass in the NES version, but in this game, he's very, very easy. You know, the only thing is that occasionally a pellet might come out of his mouth and catch you off guard. You know, they're not really easy to see when they come out sometimes. But he rarely fires even a pellet out of his mouth, so extremely easy. You pretty much just move up, then back down again. You'll see when I get to him, he's extremely easy. So that'll make beating this game a lot easier as well. But the game as a whole is just slower and, you know, just much easier. If if you want a more challenging version of this game, then try the NES version, or probably the Game Boy Color version. I think would be a lot harder as well. I haven't been able to compare yet because I haven't played the Game Boy Color version yet. So then I can, after I beat that, I can compare it difficulty wise. But this was a huge contrast after beating the NES one, yesterday. So I was able to do a fresh comparison of the two. For this, all you need to do is shoot the back end of the worms. Originally, they come out as one unit, but when you shoot the different looking segment, and that'll separate them. And once you separate them, all you got to do is shoot the back. And every time you shoot the back enough times, a part of it will break and the worm will get shorter. And when it gets down to just 2 segments, that means it's going to die after you destroy the back of it. So it's very easy. Just stay in the middle of the screen, and if you have that spread shot with the ring, just use that. Just keep shooting in the general direction. Really not much to it. This stage is not hard either. This was an easy stage for me. I still hadn't died at this point in the game. It was my first time playing. I still hadn't died, and I didn't actually lose my first life until I got to the boss of this level. And then I almost lost all my lives because I was finding it difficult with the hitboxes because I felt like I was in the clear, but I would keep getting hit by either a platform that was close to me or the boss's body itself. So then I just realized, I just can't get that close to the boss, even though logically it looks like I have enough room. I just played it safe and I just kept my distance from the boss. So you just have to take that into account, and you just have to deal with that kind of broken aspect of this game with the hitboxes. So just keep some space between you and the boss, and you'll see what I do. And it was when I did that, it was pretty easy. I don't think I ended up losing a continue here. I think I lost most of my lives though. And if not for the hitboxes, I probably would have beat most of this game without many deaths. I probably would have died in the final level because the final level had it has a wall that it traps you into, and if you don't know that, you'll instantly die. So I probably would have died at least once there, maybe a few times on the final level. But if I played it again, it might take me a few full attempts, but I could probably do it without deaths. After a few tries, I think. There are a few tricky parts, though, for sure. But yeah, just keep shooting those guys. You'll get power-ups that you probably won't even need at this point. But if you want to power up a different weapon or just get points, you can get points, which, eventually you get 1-ups from them. So it may be worth collecting them for points. At this point, I had never gotten this far because, like I said, I didn't die. I didn't lose any continues at this point, so I didn't know if stuff was going to come off the edge of the screen. So I wasn't aggressively trying to collect things from the edge of the screen because I just wanted to play it safe. But for the most part, if you're pretty good at shooters, you can reactively play most of this game on this setting and dodge most things just on reaction without having to memorize or learn anything. It just depends on your familiarity and how adept you are at these kind of games. And see, now I have 7 lives, so I was really starting to rack up a lot of lives just off of points. Which, it's better to just lose a life instead of a continue, because then you can at least start at a checkpoint, which, if you get to a boss, the checkpoint's always close to the boss. So you'll have, multiple attempts on the boss, which is very helpful. You really don't need fully powered up weapons for the boss fights. You would probably want to at least get your ring weapon, but you don't need to have it powered up. It doesn't seem to make much of a difference. It's, the bosses don't take that many hits regardless. The final boss does take quite a few hits, so it's a little bit intense. Even though it's easy, you still don't want to fuck up, because a pellet can come out of his mouth and kill you, and it's just kind of annoying. I think I died once on the final boss. A far cry from the NES version, which I died a shitload of times on the final boss, and, I had to spend a lot of time just practicing the final boss. I spent probably like 30 minutes just practicing the final boss with save and load states, just focusing on the final boss. And then I still got nervous and fucked it up a lot on the NES version, so it still took me a long time. It still took me a lot of full level attempts before I finished the final level and the final boss. Yeah, so this is where I kind of got fucked over. And in this case, I'm going to blame the game more for that because of the weird hitboxes. But so this part, I would say, be careful and just keep your distance. Don't get as close as you think you can get to the boss. Just keep a gap between you and the boss, because then shit just you'll just see yourself randomly explode, and you'll wonder why. And I think it's because the hit detection is kind of fucked up. But yeah, so just shoot this gem on the boss. And of course, be aware of the falling platforms. They can trap you in and kill you. I only stayed on the left side for a little while. Then I move up here. Then I move down and I start shooting up again. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. So, don't spend too much time on any of the sides. You don't want to get too close to the boss, and you don't want to get trapped in by the platforms. But yeah, if you follow that, it should be pretty easy. You probably won't even die if you watch the video first. But yeah, stay tuned for the final part. Welcome back to the final part of the tutorial for Burai Fighter Deluxe for Game Boy on the hardest difficulty setting, Ultimate. And yeah, this is where the game starts to get more challenging. So, you may have several attempts. I mean, like I said, it doesn't get that hard if you're familiar with these kind of shooters, but it does get more challenging. So, here I have two recommendations. You can get the missile weapon, which always shoots to the right, and that'll kill the asshole enemies that pop out of the right side of the screen and shoot at you. Or what you can do, what I ended up doing was, I like the ring weapon, so I ended up using the ring. And initially I'll shoot up, take out these ostriches or whatever the fuck they are through the walls. And take out the turrets immediately by shooting up so they don't have a chance to fire. And then immediately, when you finish killing the turrets, turn to the right immediately and keep shooting. And the reason you do that is so that you can take out those assholes because they come out quickly and it could be a big problem. So, take out the turrets, turn to the right, and just keep firing, and you should be all right. You shouldn't have a problem with this part. If you don't do that, it can be tough because they'll pop out and cause a lot of problems. But if you're ready for them, if you're ready for them, then you take them out, and they won't drag it out. Now, sometimes this happens, and I don't know how I did this, but this is like an alternate route through the level, and it's kind of dangerous, but it's also good because there's a 1-up in here, and you get a lot of power-ups. So, if you follow what I did, you may end up activating this. See, that's a 1-up right there, which is useful. And it is a harder route because of all the enemies that come out. And you see I use a few of those screen-clearing bombs, which I'd recommend using those in this part just to be safe. And then either way, you come to this part of the level. So you always come to this part of the level, which is your checkpoint. And this part's a little tricky because sometimes projectiles and things disappear because of the glitchiness of the Game Boy, handling a lot of projectiles and stuff. And then this thing, you're going to want to keep shooting at it. So keep your fire on it and dodge anything that comes at you. Get the power-ups you can, but don't worry too much about which weapons you grab. Don't focus on that because then you'll probably get distracted and killed. Just grab them as they appear, and, if you don't get what you want, you can always get the right weapon later. It doesn't matter too much for this. And then those birds are annoying because they shoot and drop down. So just, be prepared for that. If you have any bombs left and you need to use them, just use them to clear out some of the bullshit. Then start shooting down and go through here. That's the hardest part of the level, probably, The boss, I think... The boss is a little tricky, but... in a lot of ways, it's pretty damn easy, too. It's just, you can fuck up on it because of the hitboxes are weird in this game. That was the main difficulty I had with the game when I died, was because I felt like I got hit when I was, trying to just move carefully around something like I normally would. I would, normally get very close to bullets and shooters and move around bullets, and I make very tight movements, and I'll get very close to enemies, but in this, doing that kind of tight maneuvering will get you killed, so it's just something to remember, keep in mind while you're playing. But like I said, there's not a ton of bullets and stuff on screen most of the time, so most of the time it won't be too difficult. But this level is where it starts to get a little challenging. And for this part, I usually get into the gap when the screen is about to fade out because I think you may be able to get crushed by the wall, but I'm not even sure. But basically, just avoid those stupid spinning things. You know, they're easy to avoid once you know they're coming. For this, just keep an eye on this thing that keeps moving. You know, just keep it in your mind and focus on the bird. Just shoot the shit out of the bird. But remember, don't get too close because that's what was getting me killed because of the, you know, the shitty hitboxes. So just, you know, keep your distance and just circle strafe around the bird and just shoot the shit out of it. You'll beat it. It's really not hard. It's a little tricky. And this is the final stage since they stripped out the overhead stages. This is the last level of the game, and the last boss is very easy. So, and this stage is much easier than the previous stage as well. So, by this point, you're pretty much definitely going to beat the game if you got this far. Yeah, see, in there, I think it's in here is a dead end. If you go in there, you're pretty much dead because it'll scroll to the end of the screen and trap you. I think that's the area. Not 100% sure. Because obviously I didn't go in there on this successful attempt or, you know, that would be a death. So, but you'll see it in the beginning. You'll probably get trapped once if you're not expecting it. This part's very easy. You just got to quickly move to the gaps. Just keep descending downward and going through the gaps that you see me going through. I mean, if you go through one of the wrong gaps, like the one on the right, then you can die on those right gaps. So, I mean, you know, you got to keep that in mind. But I got that on the first time, so, I mean, I think it's pretty easy to read. Or I got lucky, but I think it's pretty fucking slow. There's a 1-up right there, so you might want to grab that. It'll give you more attempts on the final boss, because the final boss, you know, he can fuck you over with those pellets he shoots out. Because they come out without much warning. You know, there's not a lot of warning for them, so I found using the missile weapon on the final boss actually worked really well. It may have even caused some kind of slowdown or something because the boss wasn't shooting a lot of pellets until the end. But I don't know, maybe that's what the boss normally does. Like I said, I only died on him once, so I don't know him that well. But it's extremely simple. The fight is extremely simple. Not much to explain here except, you know, dodge the bullets and just kill whatever appears. I wasn't getting greedy with the gems here. You know, I do collect some of them on the edge of the screen, but I won't go crazy on the edge of the screen because, you know, there's a lot of shit that pops out of the edge. And that'll instantly kill you since you die in one hit, so, you know. You don't really need to get greedy. I don't even think you can... I don't even remember if you can use the bombs on the final boss. I don't even know if you can... I think I was able to use bombs on some of the bosses, but, you know, I don't even remember for sure. I thought I did. But I didn't really need to. They don't hurt the boss as far as I can tell. Even if, you know, they didn't in the NES version, and I don't think they do in this one either. I think they may just clear out enemies and debris, but not really hurt the bosses. So you won't need them anyway. That's all you get from the gems is your bombs, so, you know, you don't really need them for this final boss. But yeah, this level is very easy. There's really not a lot to worry about. The flies can be annoying, but I mean, you usually have enough time to clear them out and to move around, so they're much more annoying on the NES version, where you pretty much have to memorize where they're going to appear, otherwise you get kind of fucked over. These guys are extremely hard on the NES version, very annoying, but in this they're very easy. They move very slow in this. Still, you know, you want to make sure you're focusing fire on them, obviously, but by the time they get to you, they'll just kill themselves by going into your bullets. So you don't really have to worry about them. I actually wasn't expecting this to be the final level until I started seeing all these platforms and flies. Then I remembered this is kind of how the NES version is, somewhat. So then I figured this must be the final level. There's definitely some similarities. Much easier, though. So yeah, after these waves of flies, then you're going to just have the final boss. And all you got to do for this final boss, as soon as he comes close, you just go back down, come back up, go back down, come back up, go back down, you know. I mean, yeah, very fucking simple. The only issue, you got to make sure that the missiles or whatever gun you're using is going into his weak spot, but you'll be able to tell because he'll be flashing, obviously. That means he's taking his damage. So the only thing you got to watch out for is the occasional pellet will come out of his mouth kind of randomly. It's bizarre. But I did get hit by one of those one time, and I lost 1 life on him. But after that, I beat it. That's the only thing you got to worry about. You have plenty of time to move down. I mean, the boss is really slow. Cool looking boss, but, extremely easy. It does take a lot of hits, though, so, things can get kind of sloppy if one of those pellets comes out. But yeah, there's really not much to this. There might be a little luck involved with the pellets, your first time fighting them, but yeah, that's about it. And then after this, you've defeated the ultimate mode, so let me know if you have any other questions, or if there's anything else you want to see, any other types of games. And thanks for watching.